Georgia, South Carolina, and North Carolina together are home to over 26 million people. Despite this, each major metropolitan area in these three states is located quite far inland from the Atlantic coast, a stark contrast to the northeastern states and Florida. I think this is a classic example of how geography shapes settlement patterns, because while coastal areas sometimes offer natural beauty, economic and environmental factors can make inland areas more attractive. For example, storm risks or terrain on the coast may have encouraged the growth of large cities inland, which is linked to historical development. So, why do you think more people aren't choosing to live on this mysterious and sparsely populated East Coast? Beneath the barren East Coast lies a region encompassing the eastern counties of Georgia, South Carolina, and North Carolina, home to quite unique geographic features that both facilitate and hinder human settlement. I think this diversity perfectly reflects nature's dualistic influence, as some elements provide protection while others limit development. The region we're discussing in this video is generally characterized by flat sandy beaches, barrier islands, and vast salt marshes. These barrier islands form some of the iconic and picturesque landscapes of the southeast coast, but they also act like a double-edged sword, providing some protection against the fury of the Atlantic, but generally not stable enough for large-scale permanent human activities, such as significant port operations, which, in my view, encourages coastal tourism while curbing industrial growth. Further inland, the terrain gradually rises to rounded hills and low mountains, presenting different opportunities and challenges. This geography has influenced the industries that have historically thrived here, particularly shaping agriculture in Georgia and South Carolina, which focused on plantation economies with cash crops such as tobacco, cotton, and rice. This trend toward plantations and agriculture eventually led to a drastic increase in slavery in these states, as managing these massive operations required an incredible amount of labor. In my interpretation, this historical period profoundly impacted not only the economy, but also the demographics of the Southeast, leaving lasting scars. For example, as of 2021, the entire southern region of the U.S. is home to approximately 56% of the country's black population, with Atlanta alone trailing New York City at around 2.2 million. In North Carolina, the topography becomes somewhat more diverse. The flat coastal plain gives way to the elevated Piedmont region, and eventually the Appalachian Mountains, adding forestry and mining to the region's economic activities. I believe this transition enhances the state's diversity, supporting tourism and natural resource-based industries, but also creating transportation challenges. The sparse East Coast is also marked by significant rivers, such as the Savannah River, which forms the natural border between Georgia and South Carolina, and the Cape Fear River in North Carolina. While these rivers are essential for inland trade and transportation, they aren't large enough to facilitate meaningful maritime trade, as the Mississippi River or the St. Lawrence River do for the U.S. Midwest and Canada. Finally, it's important to consider the region's vulnerability to climate extremes, particularly hurricanes. This has shaped not only the natural landscape, but also human activities and settlement patterns, with natural disaster risk always a factor in coastal planning and development. Specifically, a full 56 hurricanes and tropical storms have struck this region since 1990, making it one of the most dangerous areas to live in terms of natural disaster preparedness. Generally, only Florida gets more hurricanes, but that's due to the combination of those coming from the Atlantic Ocean and the Gulf of Mexico. The empty East is a fascinating region of the country, but if you haven't noticed yet, its history and geography have created problems that make it difficult to establish large population centers on the coast. We'll now examine why this is the case, but first, if you enjoyed the video, hit that subscribe button. More fun geography videos are just a click away. The southeastern coast of the United States, particularly the states of Georgia, South Carolina, and North Carolina, has evolved very differently from its northern neighbors. I believe this is a striking example of how geography determines economic and social development, as natural features sometimes create opportunities and sometimes impose limitations. While states like New Jersey, New York, and Massachusetts facilitated the growth of large urban centers with their deep, ice-carved harbors, the southeastern coastline is covered by a broad band of barrier islands, salt marshes, and flat plains. The lack of natural harbors along this coast prevented these states from becoming major centers of maritime trade, and this geographical constraint created a domino effect that continues to this day, directing the region's population towards agriculture. The region's barrier islands provide some protection against the Atlantic Ocean, but they are not stable enough for large-scale maritime activities, such as significant port operations. New York City, for example, is built on a natural harbor formed tens of thousands of years ago by glacial ice, allowing the city to have dense construction with minimal impact. Lacking the benefits of natural harbors, the southeastern states could not easily participate in the transatlantic trade that spurred the industrialization and urbanization of the northeastern cities. Instead, they saw the growth of plantation economies driven by cash crops such as rice, cotton, and tobacco. The vast, flat lands far from the coast were suitable for large-scale agriculture, and the region's hot, humid climate provided an ideal environment for the development of these crops. Plantations required a large workforce, which led to the horrific importation and enslavement of Africans, a historical atrocity that left lasting social and cultural consequences throughout the region and the country. A critical point in understanding the roots of struggles for equality and justice. In my view, unlike the Northeast's diversified economies encompassing manufacturing, transportation, and eventually technology, the Southeast specialized in a plantation economy fueled by the forced labor of slaves, and it was precisely this plantation economy that deterred urbanization. Since plantations were largely self-sufficient entities, they were not dependent on urban centers for labor or goods as manufacturing was. The small towns and cities that emerged were generally geared towards supporting agricultural practices, not industrial production. Even the region's major rivers, such as the Savannah and Cape Fear, failed to compensate for the lack of natural harbors, serving more as canals for domestic trade, not gateways for international commerce. Today, the legacy of this geography is still felt. While the modern economy has diversified and technology has reduced geographical limitations, the Southeast's historical agricultural focus has left an indelible mark. Even as cities like Atlanta and Charlotte have risen as major metropolitan areas, becoming transportation hubs and diversifying their economies, coastal regions still bear the marks of a bygone era dominated by plantations and an agricultural lifestyle. I think this serves as a reminder of how regions evolve and the importance of not ignoring historical context when planning for future sustainable development. While the coastal regions of Georgia, South Carolina, and North Carolina are rich in natural beauty, they haven't attracted the dense populations we see in Atlanta and Charlotte, or even in nearby metropolitan centers like the Northeast Florida. I think this illustrates how modern urbanization is tied to economic attractions beyond natural and historical factors, because beauty alone isn't enough. Job opportunities and infrastructure also play a critical role. Leaving aside historical factors, such as the lack of natural harbors and a plantation-focused economy, there are several contemporary reasons that explain this population density disparity. Cities and metropolitan areas are the primary magnets for population and job opportunities, but job opportunities in these coastal regions are generally less abundant and diverse compared to other parts of the country. While tourism and some forms of agriculture and fishing stand out, there are far fewer jobs in these industries compared to popular sectors like manufacturing, which, in my view, underlines the importance of diversity for sustainable development, as reliance on a single sector can limit growth potential. Large metropolitan areas like Atlanta, Charlotte, and the Raleigh-Durham Research Triangle have become major corporate hubs, attracting young professionals, creating a wide range of jobs and, to some extent, absorbing the economic vitality of the region as a whole. These metro areas have drawn economic power from potentially large cities on the coast. Much of this stems from infrastructure, particularly transportation. Large cities are generally transportation hubs, facilitating domestic and international travel for residents. In this region, Atlanta has become the dominant transportation center. Taking the air away from other regional cities, Atlanta was once known as one of the country's largest rail hubs and still has the largest airport, so cities like Savannah, Georgia, don't have nearly as many transportation options, further deterring businesses from establishing themselves there. Today, the entire region we're discussing is home to over 10 million people. That's quite a lot, but it's still relatively sparse compared to the development of other regions in the eastern half of the country. The largest metropolitan areas in the region are Columbia and Charleston, South Carolina, with approximately 820,000 and 800,000 people respectively. Fayetteville and Wilmington, North Carolina, with 520,000 and 282,000 people respectively, and Savannah, Georgia, with 440,000. Neither is small, but even combined, they're less than half of Atlanta's 6.1 million, which is interesting because Charleston, in particular, was founded more than 150 years before Atlanta. I think this shows that early start doesn't always provide an advantage, and how modern infrastructure and economic strategies can outpace historical legacy. Interestingly, while Atlanta is by far the largest city in the southern region of the country, Charleston, South Carolina, was founded more than 150 years before Georgia's capital, and given its location on the Atlantic coast, the South Carolina city should have become the dominant city of the Southeast, not Atlanta, due to the colonial rulers' desire for easy access to new lands and their need for water-connected transportation methods. But history often doesn't unfold as expected. And I think this is a lesson in how chance and strategic location can change destiny, because early advantages don't always guarantee lasting dominance. One of the key factors in the evolution of the two cities is Atlanta's role as a transportation hub. Originally established as a railroad junction called Terminus, Atlanta's strategic location offered a crossroads of multiple modes of transportation connecting the South's agricultural wealth with markets in the Midwest, West, and Northeast. A central location further strengthened by the development of Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport, which has become one of the world's busiest airports, attracting businesses and residents equally, accelerating growth. While Charleston has had an advantage for over a century, its physical geography was differently limiting than Atlanta's. Charleston sits on a peninsula, constrained by the Cooper and Ashley Rivers and the Atlantic Ocean, a geographical limitation that somewhat hampered its expansion. Atlanta, on the other hand, had more room for outward growth and development, which, in my view, highlights how decisive the natural environment can be in urban planning, especially in coastal cities. The low-lying coastal terrain surrounding Charleston makes it more vulnerable to sea level rise and extreme weather events, which can deter heavy investment and large-scale urban development. Social and cultural factors also influence the city's different paths. While both cities are vibrant cultural centers, Atlanta has gained a reputation as the unofficial capital of the South, attracting international events such as the 1996 Summer Olympics and being the birthplace of influential civil rights movements. Charleston, while culturally rich and historically significant, has not hosted similarly impactful international or national events. Ultimately, Atlanta had so many advantages when it was founded that by 1890, it was already larger than the most populous city in South Carolina. It's really interesting to examine how the Northeast and Southeast developed geographically. You could almost draw a line showing that as you go south, the major population centers move further away from the Atlantic coast. But while many of these coastal communities don't have the population of Atlanta or Charlotte, they offer so much more in terms of cultural and historical possibilities, which I think is a reminder that quality of life isn't measured solely by size, because small places can carry unique charm and heritage. I hope you enjoyed learning more about the sparsely populated East Coast of the United States. Please subscribe to my channel, and if you'd like to watch more of my videos, Here's one for you. Thanks for watching. See you next time. Goodbye.